Namaste. Our subject must necessarily always include the self, a universal reality. Vedanta names it as the interior reality. We think of Atman subjectively. When we think of it as that which endlessly grows and expands, as the basis of all being, often we refer to it as Brahman. Brahman and Atman are a single reality. But when we speak about a single reality, it goes beyond simply essential being or essential being of self. We look at the self on the surface, in the serene, in the omnipresent. It is always the same self. This chapter that we're dipping into, Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara, one of the great chapters in the second half of his great book, opens with a citation from the Bhagavad Gita, referring to the reality. It is there in beings indivisible and as if divided. This is the mind perplexed as it looks at a multifarious universe and sees the multiplicity and can't find what is inside of it. But it has never been divided. It is always, as the Gita says, it's indivisible. But it purposely presents itself in cosmic form and in every standpoint within the cosmos, as if that were its sole truth. A fundamental, unshakable truth that the individual avers, I am here, or am I not? The Gita says both are true. Another citation, as this chapter opens, this one from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, and I think it's in the 6th chapter, verses 1, 7, 8, and 11. We'll read it all as Sri Aurobindo bothered to translate it afresh. It is the might of the Godhead in the world that turns the wheel of Brahman. Him one must know, the Supreme Lord of all lords, the Supreme Godhead above all Godheads. Supreme, too, is his Shakti, and manifold the natural working of her knowledge and her force. One Godhead, occult in all beings, the inner self of all beings, the all-pervading, absolute without qualities, the overseer of all actions, the witness, the knower. This rather sums up that it is the power of the divine that manifests the world. The wheel of Brahman is not an illusion. It is a deliberate manifestation. The wheel is turned by the self-conscious Brahman, Atman. And if we would know deeply and perfectly, it is that identity that we have to seek to attain. We cannot know that as an object. We can't look at it like from afar and say, ah, that's a mountain there, I have the knowledge. No, that isn't knowledge. That's indirect. For Sri Aurobindo, true knowledge is always knowledge by identity. So to know that Supreme Lord, you in a sense have to become that Supreme Lord. This Upanishad doesn't say how to do that. The Bhagavad Gita, of course, lays out the path. We'll come back to that. That is what is above all Godheads, above the cosmic deities, above Agni and Indra and the whole panoply. This is the beyond. But all of this hails from a Shakti, a power of the divine energy. And it is her knowledge and her force, knowledge and force, supramental, yes, that begins the movement of the cosmos above. This one Godhead, this single reality, sits inside of all beings. Inner self, sustaining, supporting all beings, all pervading. It's everywhere. You can't find where it is not. It has these many qualities that we see and experience in the universe, and yet it is an absolute without qualities. It is that which propels, compels, sustains, dissolves all actions and states of becoming. It is that which watches. It is that which knows. So this is Vedanta, and Vedanta accounts for all of our experience of self and world, and finds they're one. Yes, this is a referral from wisdom. Most of us wander, and the question is posed by the philosopher and anyone who suffers, what are we really? Who are we really? Are we capable of change? Vedanta states, the surface of our being is not unreal. It is mobile, it is dynamic, full of change, and represents a fundamental truth of self. It is not all we are. It is not all we are. The Gita carries us from the recognition of this mobile self, ever-changing, this personality that moves on the surface of the universe, experiences joy and suffering and everything else, carries us from that by conscious work into knowledge of the unmoving, eternal self. So if we know ourselves as the ever-changing kshara person, purusha, that carries us to the unchanging akshara person, purusha. But that release from being identified with what changes all the time is not all that's appointed to us as spiritual aspirants. In the Gita, which is in a sense a summation of Vedantic teaching, we're to see through the revelation that Krishna offers to Arjuna a third possibility, an all-encompassing possibility, a sublime poise, a third personhood that engulfs both the time-bound and, in a sense, the timeless poises. That third personhood is the supreme. And just as the Shvetashvatara says that you have to know, the Gita points to the same thing. It's not simply freedom from death by living in the eternal poise of the self that gives you the ultimate conquest. The ultimate is gained when one lives in, exists in, breathes in identity with this supreme being. So the real self is self-founded. It doesn't look for the authority to exist from outside. It simply is, based upon its own reality. It doesn't need permission to extend itself into multiplicity. It can say, I am one, behold, I am also multiple. And it can do it through an act of will. And in fact, it has done so. How many universes are there? How many successive deployments of this eternal self into fields of time have there been? We don't know. We are here and now, and it is the reality that we must grasp that is important to us, not to know these large hypotheticals. But Sri Aurobindo has written that this reality, which is the alone, because only it exists, and the real, because there is no unreality within the real, is multiple and multifaceted. So he says, and I'm going to quote lengthily here from page 340 in the Collected Works of Sri Aurobindo, if you want to read along, as there are three fundamental aspects in which we meet this reality: self, conscious being, or spirit, and God; the divine being, or to use the Indian terms, the absolute and omnipresent reality, Brahman, manifest to us as Atman, Purusha, Ishvara. So too, its power of consciousness appears to us in three aspects. It is the self-force of that consciousness, conceptively creative of all things, Maya. Parenthesis here, sidebar. Maya to Sri Aurobindo is not the power of illusion, but the power of a massive consciousness to take the infinite and formalize it in a significant figure which is finite. So it can embed the infinite in the finite. That is its power. That's number one. It is Prakriti, number two. Nature or force, made dynamically executive, working out all things under the witnessing eye of the conscious being, the self or spirit. It is the conscious power of the divine being, Shakti, which is both conceptively creative and dynamically executive of all the divine workings. So these three separate things, Maya, Prakriti, and Shakti. These three aspects and their powers base and comprise the whole of existence and all nature, and taken together as a single whole, they reconcile the apparent disparateness and incompatibility of the supracosmic transcendence, the cosmic universality, and the separativeness of our individual existence. The absolute, cosmic nature, and ourselves are linked in oneness by this triune aspect of the one reality. For, taken by itself, the existence of the Absolute, the Supreme Brahman, would be a contradiction of the relative universe, and our own real existence would be incompatible with its sole incommunicable reality. But the Brahman is, at the same time, omnipresent in all relativities. It is the Absolute, independent of all relatives, the Absolute, basing all relatives, the Absolute, governing, pervading, constituting all relatives. There is nothing that is not the omnipresent reality. You'll remember that he named the first part of the life divine the omnipresent reality. So he comes back to this climactic statement here, uniting the Absolute, the universe, and the individual soul, moving in the moving universe, trying to find its seat again in the Absolute from which it came. Transcendent, universal, individual, the three states of being. But there are three powers in this conscious being that he wants to draw our attention to in this. First, we see a power of self-determination. The self is one, Swayambhu, self-constituted, isn't looking for being from any other quarter. No authority can tell it what to do. It can determine itself. First, we see this power of self-determination. And he has a phrase, an incoercible unity. You don't have to force it together. It exists in that. And when we recite our peace chant at the beginning, Purnam Madaha, Purnamidam, that is full, this is full, that supports this idea in a phrase of what is the self-multiplication of reality, the truth of the one in the many, the alternation of their truths in manifestation. Because depending on where you, the percipient, is, where you, the witness, the knower, is, you can fuse yourself into that Absolute and disappear to the universe. You can invest yourself in the universe, lose sight of the Absolute. But the Absolute does not lose sight of either the universe or the individual working within it. The one unites the all, and the one unites each in the all. This supposes that the one is simultaneously and universally conscious of all these statuses and supports each. This, Sri Aurobindo writes, not as a deduction from philosophy, but again, as the statement in intellectual form of a great realization that he had, which he formulated when he came to Pondicherry. So that's the first power. The second is the power of self-limitation. Individually established, this poise would see the same world, but from its own perspective. This is the truth of your being. that the divine can limit itself to your perspective, and when you look at the same world we all share, you see it your way. And you see it as if you're at the center of the cosmos, and you are. But it's your vision of the cosmos. It's your station in the cosmos. Yes, one can widen. One can become one with the all, and it is an enormous experience, an engulfing experience. One has to be ready for it. So one perfects first, one's own station. You do the innings, as they used to say, to advance to this experience which would vault you into allness, everywhereness, the oneness in the world. There is a third in the range of the infinite consciousness, and that is the power of self-absorption. And all three are powers of authentic conscious being and refer back to Sat-Chit Ananda. Self-absorption means that you can go, in a sense, back into the transcendence. Self-determination means that that being can create and sustain, maintain, dissolve, if it so wishes, a universal entity. And self-limitation means that so long as we need to be limited to grow back to a perfect selfhood, we can. It is permission granted. So all three, again, take us back to that ordinal status of true being, which is conscious and whose nature is delight, Sat-Chit Ananda. The self can be and is both static, a state, eternal, immutable, unmoving, sheer white peace, undisturbed, without time, no tick-tock. And it can also be dynamic, a throbbing universe, breathing, living, dying, expanding, growing, evolving, perfecting itself, throwing away each perfection for a new. So this picture that Sri Aurobindo offers is derived from his foundational experience and shaped into a luminous philosophy. But the philosophy follows the experience. His power in finding the word that moves, that shapes, that creates, that inspires, is without parallel to my experience. Well, we read on. We have a sentence from him again. This is on page 361. For we can see that the conscious power, the Shakti that acts and creates, is not other than the Maya or all-knowledge of Brahman. It is the power of the self. Prakriti is the working of the Purusha, conscious being active by its own nature. The duality, then, of soul and world energy, silent self, and the creative power of the spirit is not really something dual and separate. It is bayun. End of quote. Two in one. It is one thing with two poles. Self, reality, is complete. Contains all these. We can rise in transcendence and be released from the world in trance, or pervade the vast universe with an equal consciousness. Both we can do riding on a power, whether we recognize it or not, that is self-born. Atman is also Atma Shakti. The power to release ourselves comes from the self. We think we're solving a riddle. We're getting rid of the universe. We're using the secret force available in the self that can say, I am self-determined here, and I now unwind my self-determination. The essential realization that we aim for when we get free of the ignorance that would define us only as this shape, this bag of emotions, this set of ideas, that does not describe the whole potentiality of self. That self is one, and we are one with its eternal unborn essence. That is always within us. We can draw upon that as we become capable, as we grow, as we become wise. We are within, around, above, omnipresent. We think we're caught. We are eternally free. We have not been sentenced to the universe. We have enrolled in the universe. So let's be clear. We can dwell in more than one aspect of the single being. Several states of conscious possession at once are possible. On the surface, we are small and actively living in and outgrowing our ignorant, partial formation. From that partiality, we can rise into a fullness and maintain our poise in the vast. And so too, we can exceed and transcend or move behind and be free. Or portions of the nature are made free and vast, while others remain relatively fixed in the fields of limitation and ignorance. Some of us is wise, some of us is not. Yoga is what delivers us into the more that we eminently are. Not only are we resident in different poises of the same self, but we flow through different experiences of time and time-space, space-time, as we say now. All are interrelated, all are constituted in the single self. So Sri Aurobindo describes a multivalent reality that encompasses, as he would say, a simultaneous multiplicity of self-representation of one reality. All for one, one for all. So we have the essential existence. We have the whole consciousness. We have a processive movement of consciousness force, Chit Shakti, and its successive working out of what has been seen by it in the static vision of the eternal. This is the time movement. That's a quote from Sri Aurobindo on page 378. The point for us, as we struggle to find out who we are and what we can be, and what possibilities of transformation are calling to us through growth and self-enlightenment is that yoga can unite them all. Not a particular brand of yoga, but yoga as a brand representing unification. The yoking together around the essence of our nature, powerfully, deliberately, consciously, and of course, beautifully. Yoga restores beauty to the world. The play of Ananda, where otherwise there would merely be force and will and the gathering of data and information shaped into a sort of knowledge. But that is apara-vidya. The great vidya, para-vidya, is based on oneness, which unifies us with the truth of beauty, the truth of love, the real source of power. And yes, always floating on the conscious ocean of real being. So, I thought we might read tonight from Savitri in Book 1, Canto 3, The Yoga of the Soul's Release. Start on page 31. He takes us with him here. Ever his consciousness and vision grew. They took an ampler sweep, a loftier flight. He passed the border marked for matter's rule, and passed the zone where thought replaces life. Out of this world of signs, suddenly he came into a silent self, where world was not, and looked beyond into a nameless vast. These symbol figures lost their right to live. All tokens dropped our sense can recognize. There the heart beat no more at body's touch. There the eyes gaze no more on beauty's shape. In rare and lucent intervals of hush, into a signless region he could soar, packed with the deep contents of formlessness, where world was into a single being wrapped, and all was known by the light of identity, and spirit was its own self-evidence. The Supreme's gaze looked out through human eyes, and saw all things and creatures as itself, and knew all thought and word as its own voice. There unity is too close for search and clasp, and love is a yearning of the one for the one. And beauty is the sweet difference of the same, and oneness is the soul of multitude. There all the truths unite in a single truth, and all ideas rejoin reality. There, knowing herself by her own termless self, wisdom supernal, wordless, absolute, sat uncompanioned in the eternal calm, all-seeing, motionless, sovereign, and alone. There knowledge needs not words to embody idea. Idea seeking a house in boundlessness, weary of its homeless immortality, asks not in thought's carved brilliant cell to rest, whose single window's clipped outlook on things sees only a little arc of God's vast sky. The boundless with the boundless there consorts. While there one can be wider than the world, while there one is one's own infinity. His center was no more an earthly mind. A power of seeing silence filled his limbs. Caught by a voiceless white epiphany, into a vision that surpasses forms, into a living that surpasses life, he neared the still consciousness, sustaining all. The voice that only by speech can move the mind became a silent knowledge in the soul. The strength that only in action feels its truth was lodged now in a mute, omnipotent peace. A leisure in the labor of the worlds, a pause in the joy and anguish of the search, restored the stress of nature to God's calm. A vast unanimity ended life's debate. Namaste. Jai Ma. I trust you're well. Be in touch with each other. Be in touch always with the One. Let us see you reach out and not touch it. All the very best. Namaste. Jai Ma.